To Daf Zayin Amid Aleph, or by the two dots. The basic premise of the Mishnah that we had yesterday is that if a person makes a neder to bring a certain amount, but he never specified the amount, so we always go the least amount. We always go the least, right? We don't say you have to pay $1 million. We give you the least amount. So the Mishnah said that if a person said he's going to give gold, but he didn't specify how much, he give a dinar. The question is, why a dinar? A dinar was a lot. Why not an ounce? Much smaller amount. Again, we're always going the smallest amount. So why go a dinar of zahav? A dinar is maybe the smallest coin, but it's still a lot. Go an ounce, half an ounce. Go a much smaller amount. Says the Gemara, Vidilma Naska. Maybe he meant a Naska. Naska was just a small hunk of gold, which was much smaller than a dinar. So why are you going dinar? Go smaller than that. So the Gemara says, you're right. The case specifically was he said he's going to give a currency. If he would have just said, I'm giving gold, you're right. You would give the smallest amount that people consider an amount. Let's say an ounce, fine. The case is where he said a tabas, he said a coin. So the smallest coin is a dinar. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Elazar, Amar Matbeya. He said a coin. So once you mention a coin, we'll go the smallest coin, which is a dinar. So says the Gemara, there are coins that are smaller than a dinar. There's a priti. Priti were tiny. So the Gemara says, Amar Papa, priti did the havali of the inchi. People don't make pritim out of gold. Back then, prutim, it's the equivalent of a penny. Pennies were not made out of gold. So the smallest currency that was common out of gold was a dinar. Then the Mishnah said, what about silver? So the Mishnah said, a dinar of silver, and it's going to be the exact same shakavatariya. Says the Gemara, Dilma Naska, why go dinar? Go smaller than that, go an ounce, a small hunk. Amar Rav Elazar, Damar Matbeya. Rav Elazar says the case is where he said a coin. So once it has to be a coin, then he'll go a dinar. I Dilma Priti. Now here's the thing. The pritim, which were very small coins, may not have been made out of gold, but they were very common to be made out of silver. So why not just donate a pruta of silver? The Amar Rav Sheishes, Ba'asar deloisagu priti bekasper. We're talking about a location where they don't make prutim out of silver. You have to remember, when it comes to nedarim, it's very much totally in the location, because we go into your mindset. So when a person says a small coin, if they're in that location, they make prutim out of silver, then give a pruta. We're talking about a location where they don't make prutim out of silver. So the smallest denomination of a coin in that location was a dinar, and that's what you have to give that. Now, the Gemara says, Nechayshes layipchas mima'a kesef. If it's a nechayshes, then you have to give the value of a silver ma'ah. You weigh out copper to the value of a silver ma'ah. It says good because apparently that was the smallest denomination that people consider chashuv. Tanya, the Brisa gives a different opinion. Again, according to the Mishnah, if I say I'm going to give copper, but I don't say how much, I have to weigh out a silver ma'ah's worth and give that amount of weight in copper. The Brisa has a different opinion. Rav Elazar ben Yaakov Omer leyipchas mitzinura ketana shel nechayshes. You have to donate a small copper fork. That's the minimum amount. It's not a silver ma'ah, it's a small copper fork. Why? Because there was a usage in the Beis Hamikdash of a small copper fork, as we'll see in a moment. So because a small copper fork was used in the Beis Hamikdash, so if Menachos says, I'm going to give copper, mistama, he means that amount. What was a small copper fork used in the Beis Hamikdash? They trimmed the wicks, and they would clean out the lamps with it. So because they would snip off the little wicks, and they would clean out the lamps with that copper fork. So that was the usage of the copper fork. Barzel. Now, what happens if a person promises to give iron, but he doesn't say how much? So there was one usage of iron in the Beis Hamikdash, and that was, if you ever notice, by the Kotel they have it now. Yeah, so it's not, scarecrows implies a certain thing. It's basically, if you ever notice on the Kotel, they have little spikes to stop the birds from resting. So in the corner of the Beis Hamikdash, they had these pieces of iron, an amma by an amma, very sharp on top, on the edges, to make sure that birds couldn't sit there, so that birds wouldn't sit and go to the bathroom. Which, by the way, the Mefarshim point out, so it sounds very regular to have that. Like, why would I need? So the Mefarshim say this is the second Beis Hamikdash. The first Beis Hamikdash had such kedusha, birds were not resting on it. But the second Beis Hamikdash, it was the Shechina was not shayra b'tzmidus. The Shechina was not present on a regular basis, and therefore, unfortunately, they needed to deal with this type of stuff that we would have to deal with. So they put these iron sheets of metal. So the point is, if you say I'm going to give iron, The minimum amount of iron that was used in the Beis Hamikdash was one of these sheets to put on the corner of the Beis Hamikdash, a sheet of iron, so that the birds can rest on it. So that's what you'd have to donate. So it says the Gemara Barzal, Tanya Cherim Oimrim, Recherim say, Lo Yipchos Mekal Ya'ariv. You have to give at least the amount of iron to make a Kal Ya'ariv, a bird chaser, so that they couldn't sit down. The Kama, how much is that? Rav Yosef, Amma by an Amma. An Amma by an Amma, a sheet. An Amma by an Amma is a 2 feet by 2 foot sheet of iron. Some have the same information, but reverse. That you have to give an amma by an amma. Why? Because that's the size of the bird chaser. Okay. Now, new topic, but it's very much based on what we had previously. So we said, I think on Shabbos' daf, that a person is able to bring wine as a separate carbon, but the amounts that you could bring have to be corresponding to the wine that comes with animals. 3 lug, 4 lug, 6 lug. So if let's say a person, based on this, if a person just says, I'm giving wine to the Beis HaMikdash, and he doesn't specify how much, we always go the minimum amount. So 3, 4, and 6, the minimum amount is 3. So you have to donate 3 lugin. Zak the Mishnah, Harei ala yayin. If a person says, I'm going to bring wine as a carbon, but he didn't specify how much, we always go the minimum amount, which is Layibchos mishlosha lugin. Good. Now what about oil? Now if you remember, this was also on Shabbos' daf, it's a machloikes tanoim between Rav Akiva and Rav Tarfon. Are you able to give oil as a standalone carbon? Oil was always brought with the mincha, it was mixed in with the flour. Can I just pour oil on the mizbeach? It's a machloikes tanoim. Rav Akiva says no. Rav Tarfon says yes. Let's assume we're following Rav Tarfon. Rav Tarfon's shita is that you could donate oil. The question is how much. So understand this. Wine, you could donate 3 is the minimum. Oil, he says you could donate oil as a carbon, but he never said how much. It's a machloikes. So says the Mishnah, Shemen, if a person says, I'm giving a carbon of oil, but he doesn't say how much, and we assume like Rav Tarfon that you're able to do this, so what's the minimum amount? Lo yipchos mil lug, a lug of oil. Now where does this come from, a lug? A lug makes a lot of sense. When you bring a mincha, and you pour oil in the flour, it's a lug. So Rav Tarfon says, at least this opinion of the Mishnah says, if you give a lug with a mincha, you give a lug without a mincha. Rabbi Omer disagrees. Rabbi says, no. And this is a fundamental yesod, as we'll see in the Gemara. Rabbi says like this. We agree that you learn out the source that you could donate oil is from the mincha. I agree with that. How much? That Rebbe feels it makes more sense to compare it to wine. Meaning, when you pour oil in the flour of a mincha, it's a lug. So the Tanna Kama says, so if you bring oil on its own, it's also a lug. You learn out from a mincha, you learn out from a mincha. It's called dain mina umina. When you learn out from A, you learn out entirely from A. Rebbe disagrees. Rebbe says, no, dain mina va'iki basre, which means, I'm going to learn out from a mincha that you could donate oil. How much oil? It makes more sense to compare it to wine. Just like wine is poured independently on its own and it's a liquid, and it's 3, so too oil is poured on its own independently and it's 3. Meaning Rebbe feels it makes more sense. I can learn out the premise that you donate oil from a mincha, but how much? I'd rather compare it to wine. And wine is 3, oil is 3. So the machloikes tanoim, how much oil is donated as a carbon? Tanna Kama says a lug, Rebbe says 3 lug. Now, pirashti ve'eni de ma pirashti, if a person says, I specified a certain amount as a carbon, but I specified a certain amount of wine. I don't remember how much. So remember we had yesterday that there was 60 is the max, that's by flour. Menachos says, I'm giving wine to the Beis Hamikdash as a carbon. I said, how much? I said how much, I don't remember. So you got to go max. What's the max? The max is, we figure out, what is the max in one day that they pour wine? The biggest day of the year. As we're going to see, first day of Sukkot on Shabbos is the most wine that's poured in the entire Beis Hamikdash. Out of the 354 days, it's the first day of Sukkot on Shabbos. Because you have Sukkot, which has so many karbanos, and you have Shabbos. That is the most wine per 24 hours. You'll have to donate that much wine, because that's the max. Okay. Yavi b'yoy meruba. Okay, Tan Rabbanon. Now the Gemara said, we said in the Mishnah, the minimum amount of wine to donate as a carbon is 3. We had this on Shabbos. We had this previously, Tanur Rabban on Ezrach. The pasuk says that a person can donate wine. Ezrach, a native person, it's an extra word, Malamed shenis nadvin yayin. This is the source that you're able to donate wine as a standalone carbon, even when it's not associated with an animal. Vikama, and what's the minimum amount donated? Shloisha lugin. Good. How do I know if you want to give more than that? Do you want to give 5, 4, 6? You might think you can give 2 lugin. Okay, we had this on Shabbos. Good. Now, oil was a machlokes. Oil was machlokes. What's the minimum amount of oil for a carbon? Is it 1 lug or 3 lug? What's the machlokes about? What is the basis of the machlokes? We've had this many times. Daimino means that if I'm going to learn out a concept from A, I have to learn out entirely from A. I don't say, let me learn out part of it and then let me apply another rationale. If you're going to learn out from something, you learn out entirely from something. That's called daimino. What do I mean over here? How do I know that you're able to donate oil as a standalone carbon? It's learned out from the fact that you could donate oil when it's with flour. So you're learning it out from the mincha. So says the Tanakama, daimino. Once you learn out from the mincha, you have to learn out entirely from the mincha. And therefore, if the mincha is a lug, so to this is also a lug. Rabbi disagrees. He says, daimino v'eikabasar means. Daimino v'eikabasar means, let me learn out from A, the concept. The details of the concept I can learn out from B, if it makes more sense. So therefore, I'm going to learn out from A that you could donate a mincha, that you could donate oil. The same way you could donate a mincha, you could donate oil. I'm going to learn that out from A, but stop. How much oil? That I'm going to learn out from B. It makes more sense to learn out from wine to oil. They're both liquids, they're both being donated, they're both standalone carbonos, and therefore if wine is 3 lug, so to oil is 3 lug as well. So daimina vina means you have to learn out from a mincha entirely, and therefore it's a lug. Daimina va'oiki basrei means you learn out the concept from the mincha, but how much you're going to learn out from the wine. Daimino mina, ma mincha misnadvin av shemen nami misvadvin, umina ma mincha belug av shemen belug. Rabbi savar daimino va'oiki basrei. Ma mincha misnadvin av shemen nami misvadvin, va'oiki basrei. B'nisachim, manisachim shloisha lugin, av shemen nami shloisha lugin. So the machlokes is everybody agrees the source that you could donate oil as a standalone carbon is learned out from mincha. The question is, can I then learn out the amount from wine or no? Says the Gemara, Amalu Rav Papa says, Ime mincha gamerla Rabbi, dekuliyamale pligi, daimino mina, el Rabbi me ezrich gamerla. He says, I have a different understanding of Rabbi. Why is it that Rabbi says you could donate, the minimum amount of oil donated is 3 lug? So he said, because Rabbi learns out the concept from a mincha, that you could donate oil. How much? Daimina v'oiki basrei, he learns out from wine. It's not true. He doesn't believe that you could daimina v'oiki basrei. He doesn't believe that you can learn out from A and then from B. If you learn out from something, you learn out entirely from something. He doesn't learn out, so what's the pshat? Where did Rabbi learn out that you could donate oil as a standalone carbon? So he said he learned out from a mincha. But the amount is from wine. It's not true. He learns everything out from wine. The pasuk that says you could donate wine, he thinks is also talking about oil. So it's not that he learns out A from the mincha and then B from wine. No, he learns out everything from wine. The source that you could donate wine as a carbon, he believes, is also the source that you could donate oil as a carbon. So we thought that Rebbe learns out that you could donate shemen as a carbon is learned out from the mincha, and the amount is daimina. I say it's not true. He learns out everything from wine. Says the Gemara. Good. So meaning, right now, Rav Papa is saying the source that Rebbe has that you could donate oil as a carbon is learnt out from the wine. Here's the problem, and this will end this discussion. The problem is there's a brisa where it says Rebbe's opinion, and he does not learn it out from wine. So don't tell me that he learns that from wine. There's a mafurish brisa not like that. Where's the brisa? How could you say that Rebbe learns it out from wine and not from the mincha? Vatanya, but there's a brisa that says carbon. Regarding the mincha, it says the word carbon. You're able to donate oil. So you see from here, the source is not wine. The source is from the mincha. Stop. The end of discussion. Just to finish the brisa, the comment how much shloisha lugin, which is Rebbe's shita. Man shamet amar shloisha lugin Rebbe, the kamaisin carbon. This is Rebbe's brisa, and he does not learn out the source from wine. He learns the source from mincha, which we said before. So when Rav Papa heard this, that his pshat is wrong, Rav Papa said, Amar le itani itani. Okay, I retract my statement. And intellectual honesty. Okay, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Good. Pirashi v'niyadeh pirashi yavi meruba. We said that if a person says he's going to donate wine, but he doesn't say how much, he said in a certain amount, but he doesn't remember how much, he has to give the amount of the most busy day of the year in the Beis HaMikdash. Tana, which is that day? B'yom tov rishon shel chag shechal yis b'Shabbos. The first day of Sukkot, if it falls out on Shabbos, is the most wine that is donated in one day in the Beis HaMikdash. Assuming there's no other, in the calendar, in the schedule, that is the busiest day of the year for wine. Now, new Mishnah. This is a very long Mishnah. It's not a hard Mishnah. It'll take us through most of the daf. Harei alai oila. If a person says he's going to bring an oila, now an oila can come from a bakar, it could come from a keves, it could come from even a bird. The rule generally is whatever you say you're going to donate, if you don't specify the amount, you just say, I'm bringing an oila, we give you the smallest amount financially. So harei alai oila, yavi keves, you bring a lamb. Because the Tanakama believes that out of all the animals, the lamb is the cheapest. Rav Elazar ben Azariah Omer, no. Oitar eben Yoina, you bring birds. The Gemara is going to explain, they're not arguing. Apparently in Rav Elazar ben Azariah's community, birds were cheaper than lambs, but in the Tanakama's community, lambs were cheaper than birds. Meaning they both agree we give you the cheapest animal. One said lamb, one said birds, because in one location lambs were cheaper, in one location birds were cheaper. I'd find it interesting that birds would be cheaper than more expensive than a lamb, but okay, I guess it's different locations. Okay, pirashi min abakar ve'enidem apirashi. A person says, I specified I would bring an oila from a bakar. A bakar includes cattle. I didn't specify which type though, so you have to bring every bakar up. I hope there's someone downstairs. You have to bring every bakar possibility. Meaning, if a person said, I'm giving an oila, but he doesn't specify which one, we give you the cheapest one. But if a person specified a specific type, he just doesn't remember which type, then you have to bring every possibility. So if a person said, I'm bringing an oila from bakar, but he didn't say which one, so you got to bring every different type of bakar. Meaning he said, I specified a type of bakar. I don't remember, so you have to bring every type. The type of bakar, by the way, bakar does not include sheep. Bakar is in the cow family. So bakar, so you have to bring in a par and an egel. You have to bring both opportunities. A par, which is a mommy cow, and an egel, a baby cow. You have to bring both of them. Now, what if a person said, min habehema v'nidim aparashi? A person said, I specifically specify that I would bring an oila from a behema. A behema is including all living animals, not just cows. Sheep animal as well. Every living animal, not birds, every animal, because behema is not a bird. Every behema includes all animals, and he said, I specified one type, I don't remember which one. You have to bring one of each. What is one of each? Par, egel, ayil, sa'ir, gedi, and tleh. You have to bring a calf, a ram, a cow, a goat, a kid, and a male lamb. You have to bring all, because oilas are only for males. These are all the options. Now you don't have to bring a bird because you said behema. And behema is definitely not a bird, but you have to bring one of every type because you didn't specify because you don't remember what you specified. Zak the Mishnah, pirashi v'nidem apirashti. But if let's say he said I specify, go to the next page, but I didn't specify which one. I just said any type of oila, but I didn't specify which type. Meaning, I specify which type. I don't remember what I specified. So now you have to bring not just one of every male animal. You have to bring a bird as well because you said an oila. So you have to ma'asav alei and taru ben yad. Now, the same halacha applies to a taida and a shlomim. If a person said, I'm going to bring a taida and a shlomim, taida or a shlomim, he doesn't specify which type, you get the cheapest one, which is a keves. Pirashti min bakar, if he said, I specified a taida or a shlomim from cattle, they need them apirashti, I don't remember which one, so you have to bring one of each, which is par, para, egel, agala. It's the same as an oila, the only difference is that a taida and a shlomim can come from females, so you have to have one male, one female, one male, one female, one of each type. Min behema. If you said I'm going to bring, if I specified a behema, but I don't remember which type, you have to bring every type of behema, which is par, para, egel, agala, ayel, rechela, sar, seira, gi, gedia, ta, utliya. You have to bring a bull and a cow, a male calf, a female calf, a ram and a ewe, a goat and a she-goat, a kid and a female kid, a male lamb and a female lamb. You have to bring one of each type. Harei alai shar. Okay, another halacha. Let's say a person says, I'm going to bring a shar as an oila. How much money do I have to spend? Can I get a a cheap shar? Do I have to get the most expensive shar? I just said I'm going to bring a shar. So I would actually think you should just go to the store and see whatever discount you can give. There is a minimum amount. What's the minimum amount? Yavihu unesachav. You have to spend on the ox and the libations that go with it, the wine, the oil. The amount you have to spend is a mana, 100 dinars. The reason being, Rashi says, is halacha l'Moshe Messina. Rashi says there's no rationale why it has to be this amount. It's halacha Moshe Messina. The Rambam actually says that this was talking about a location where that's what people intended. But we'll go through Rashi's pshat. It's halacha Moshe Messina. You have to give 100 dinars. Now, if you said an egel, I'm going to bring an egel. The amount of money you have to spend is yavihu nesachav b'chamesh, including the animal and the libations, 20 dinars, a fifth of the amount before. Ayil, if you said you're going to bring a ram, yavihu nesachav b'shtayim, 2 sloim, and keves, yavihu nesachav b'sela. A keves has to be a sela, but that includes the libation. So all of these amounts, 100 dinars, 20 dinars, 2 sela, a sela, all of these include the libations. Now, the Mishnah then says, shar b'mana. If a person says, I'm going to bring an ox worth a mana, so then you have to bring the ox, the 100 dinar ox, not including the libations. Meaning, if you would just say an ox, you'd have to spend 100 dinars, but that would include the libations. If you said 100 dinar ox, that means the ox without the libations is 100 dinars. Then you have to add the libations on top of that. Same thing with all the animals. Egel b'chamesh, yavi chamesh chutz min chasav. Yavi b'shtayim, ayel b'shtayim, yavi b'shtayim chutz min nesachav. Keves b'sel, yavi b'sel chutz min nesachav. Shar b'mana v'he. Oh, okay, good. Just to finish up the Mishnah. That's a lot of words. Let's say shar b'mana. So this is very simple. I promised I would bring 100 dinar shar, $100 shar. V'hevi shnai b'mana, but I bring 2 worth $100. Meaning, I said I'm going to bring $100 ox. I bring 2 $50 oxen. The halacha is lo yotza. You're not yotza. You said $100 ox. It's not that you have to bring oxen that are worth $100. You have to bring 1 ox worth $100. If you bring 2 that are 50 each, you're not yotza. It's not what you promised. And even if you bring 2 oxen, each one is worth $98, no good. You need 1 ox worth 100. Even though if you bring 2 that are 98, you're bringing way more value than $100, you have to have 1 that's at least worth $100. Shachar behavi lavan. If a person promised to bring a black ox and he brings a white ox, lavan behavi shachar, or a white ox and he brings a black ox, no good. Apparently the value of the hide of black and white are not the same. So if you promise black, you have to bring black. If you promise white, you got to bring white. Gadol behavi katan. Let's say you promised to bring a large ox and you brought a small ox. Lo yotza. You're not yotza because you promised big and you can't underdeliver. But here's the chiddush: katan behavi gadol. This we spoke about yesterday. Josh, is what we talked about after Daf, a little bit in Daf also. If a person promises a small ox and he brings a big ox, so you'd say, well, better, more the merrier. No, Rabbi says you're not Yoitza. Rabbi Omer lo Yotza. Rabbi says you're not Yoitza. The Tanakhama says Yoitza. Rabbi says you're not Yoitza. Why? Because Rabbi is a believer. The Tanakhama says you're Yoitza because if you promise a small ox and you bring a big ox, even better. Rabbi says no, you have to deliver what you promised. If you promise a small one, you have to bring a small one. You bring a big one, that's not what you promised. Just to finish up the daf. Okay, good. Now, we said in the Mishnah that when a person promises to bring an oila, but he doesn't specify which one, we always go the smallest oila. So the Tanakhama said a keves, a lamb, and Rav Elazar ben Azariah said a bird. So the Gemara says, lo pligi, they're not arguing. Marki asrei. It just depends on the location. In one location, birds were cheaper, bring a bird. In one location, lambs were cheaper, bring a lamb. Whatever is the cheaper animal, you bring. Good. Tan Rabbanon, hare alai oila b'sela lemizbeach. If a person says, I'm going to bring an oila worth a sela to the mizbeach, so he didn't specify which animal, he just said an oila worth a sela. What's an oila worth a sela? That's a keves. A keves was always a sela, as we said in the Mishnah. Halacha Moshe Messina that a keves has to be a sela. So if a person says he's going to bring an oila, that's a sela. That is a keves. Shein loch davar shekar b'sela gam mizbeach al keves. Now, what if he says parashi v'redei ma parashi? That's if he doesn't specify which animal. But let's say he specified which animal. He said, I'm bringing a specific animal worth a sela, but he doesn't remember which one. The lamb has to be valued at a sela. There could be other animals that are also valued at a sela. I'm sure you could have birds that are worth a sela. I'm sure you could have cows that are worth a sela. The lamb has to be worth a sela as a minimum. Other animals don't have to be. I'm sure they could be. So if a person promised to bring a specific animal and he itemized the animal, but he doesn't remember which one, he has to bring every animal that could be worth a selah. A bird could be worth a selah, he'll have to bring an expensive bird. If a cow could be worth a selah, he has to bring a cow. Whatever animal could be worth a selah, he has to bring to cover his bets. Good. Then the Mishnah said, if he said, I'm going to bring a bakar, and he specified what type of bakar, but he doesn't remember which one. So what does he have to bring? He has to bring a par and an egel. This is the beginning of the Mishnah. Now think about this. An egel is a baby cow, and a par is a mommy cow. He specified one of them. He doesn't remember which ones. He has to bring both. Why do you have to bring both? Just bring a par, and you should be yotze. Why? Because if you said par, good, and if you said egel, a baby cow, a par is even bigger, and it's included in it. So it must be a raya to Rabbi. What's Rabbi's shita? We had at the end of the Mishnah. Rabbi's shita is that if you promise small and you bring big, you're not yotza. Because that's a raya to Rabbi. Why? Because what did the Mishnah say? I promise I'm going to bring a cow. I don't remember which one I said. So you have to bring both types. A baby and a mommy cow. Why do I have to bring a baby cow? Because maybe you said baby cow. I'll bring a mommy cow and I'll be fine. Why? Because if I said the mother cow, good. And if I said the baby cow, the mother cow is even bigger. The halacha is it's a raya to Rebbe that if you promise small, you have to deliver small. So because it's possible you said the baby cow, you can't just bring the mommy cow. Oh, it's a raya to Rebbe. Because according to Rebbe, if you promise a small cow, you have to deliver a small cow. So because there's a possibility that you said the baby cow, you can't just bring the mother cow and be yaitza. You have to bring both. It's a raya to Rebbe. Now the Gemara, I'm just going to say this out, so we'll see this. So you see this part of the Mishnah is Rebbe, but at the end of the Mishnah, it brings Rebbe down as a machlokes. So it's kind of weird, like the beginning of the Mishnah is Rebbe, and the end of the Mishnah is Rebbe, but then in between it's not Rebbe. It's kind of strange, just the flow of the Mishnah. So the Gemara will speak it out. The Gemara says, Hamani, who is the author of this part of the Mishnah? Rebbe he. Damar Katav Evi Gadol Yatza. Rebbe, wait a minute, if it's Rebbe, Ema Seifa, keep going to the end of the Mishnah. What did the end of the Mishnah say? Shar b'mana v'hevi shnayim b'mana lo yatza. Vafilu zeh b'mana chasadina zeh chasadina shacha v'hevi lav and lav v'hechshah was all the Mishnah. Gadol v'hevi katan lo yatza, katan v'hevi gadol yatza. Rebbe amar lo yatza. So the beginning of the Mishnah is Rebbe, the end of the Mishnah is Rebbe, and in between is not Rebbe. It's a weird flow. So the Gemara says Reisha v'seifa Rebbe mitziyasa rabbanon. So the Gemara says you're right. Yeah, it is. The beginning is Rebbe, the end is Rebbe, and the middle is not. In Reisha v'seifa Rebbe mitziyasa rabbanon. V'hachi gamar davers amachlokes Rebbe rabbanon. The way you're supposed to read the Mishnah is the Mishnah brings out Rebbe shita. We're going to go to the next, a little bit later. The Mishnah starts off by saying it's Rebbe shita. Then the Mishnah means to say, you should know, it's actually, Rebbe's opinion is not universally accepted. It's taka a machlokes in general, and then it brings down the machlokes. New topic. We'll start this topic. It'll get us into tomorrow. It's not very challenging. We had this a couple days ago, but now the Gemara is going to elaborate. The Mishnah in Shkalim tells us that on Har Habayis there were 13 pushkas. 13 pushkas. Now the Mishnah itemizes what 7 of them were for, and then the Mishnah says 6 were for optional karbanos. What do I mean? 6 was cash that were placed in 6 of them, that the Beis HaMikdash would take out money, they would use it, and what would they spend it on? They would spend it on if there were times where the Beis HaMikdash was idle, where there was nothing going on in the Mizbeach, which is probably rare, but if there was times where there was just like downtime, they would go to these pushkas, take money out, and buy an oila, and bring it as an oila on the Mizbeach. Good. So here's the question, and this is going to take us to the end of today's daf. Why are there 6 of them? If they're all having the same functionality, just have one giant pushka. Why am I having 6 pushkas when they're doing the same thing? Or if not 6, 2. I don't know why you need 6 different pushkas if they're all going to the same proceeds. Says the Gemara, Tanan Hasam Shishal Nidava Keneged me. What is the functionality of 6? Why do I need 6? So what we're going to do is, today we're going to quote 4 opinions, and we're going to explain why each one is controversial. And then tomorrow we'll continue with an additional couple of opinions. Number 1, Amar Chizkiya Keneged Shisha Batei Avos Vakohanim Shetiknu Lachacham Sheshalom Ze'im Zeh. It's very interesting. The Kehanim's rotations were split up daily, 6 days of the week. Each day had a different mishmar. They split up the 6 pushkas, even though they're doing the same thing. Each mishmar had their own pushka. I'll tell you why. What was these tzedakah used for? They would take the money out, bring it as an oila for the mizbeach when the mizbeach was quiet. What would you do with the oila? The hide would go to the Kehanim. So think about what happens over here. Let's say we're all Kehanim here. Yeah. I'm a Tuesday, Menachos Monday. I show up on Tuesday, and I'm like, and I go, there's just one pushka. And I go, where's the money in this pushka? I'm like, oh, Menachos. He probably took all the money yesterday and spent it. And again, it's not his fault, because the truth is it's luck of the draw. It's really depending on whether the day's quiet or not. I'm not going to believe that. I'm going to say, you know what he probably did? He probably just bought a couple oilers. Why? Why would he do this? Because he gets the hide. The Kahanim get the hide. So if he starts spending the pushka money, meaning in other words, it's very simple. When you have 6 different rotations of Kehanim, you don't want them all spending the same pushka, because then they're going to start getting paranoid and be like, oh, he's taking too much. The answer is, you have your pushka day, I have my pushka day. You can't touch mine, I can't touch yours. And this way, there's no arguments. Now, by the way, as we'll see, I'll just say it outside as we go, all the other opinions disagree, because they say, are we really concerned that the Kehanim are going to be so paranoid, they're going to be fighting with each other? Like, also, it's not even up to them. Listen, if you told me that it was just spending of an organization, I get why that would be a problem. You only could bring an oilo when the Beis HaMikdash was quiet. I mean, that's luck of the draw. You know what I mean? Like, so, okay, that's the first opinion. Let's keep going. Rav Yochanan Amar, a second opinion. It's very simple. These coins were not the way the coins are nowadays. These were actual, like, silver, gold, copper. They would get, if there were too much of them. Think about it. If you have one giant pushka, you'll always take money from the top. The bottom money will start getting rusty. So you actually want to spread it out. That way, there was so much money that they wouldn't get to the bottom money, and therefore it would cause it to rust. Okay. Which, by the way, is a chiddush that money would rust that quickly, but okay, I guess they're concerned about that. Third opinion, Zeiri Amar, Keneged Par, Egel, Ayil, Vekeves, Gediva, Sa'ir, Verebi Hida Amar, Kotter, Vehevi Gadol Yatza. A tremendous chiddush. He says, you misunderstand what the purpose of these pushkas were for, and this is why it's quoted. The purpose of these pushkas were not extra for the Kohanim to just bring when the Beis HaMikdash was idly by. You know what they also functioned as? You show up to the Beis HaMikdash with a chatas. You don't necessarily have an animal. You would show up, put the amount in the pushka. They would they would process it. Let's say a chatas is $100. You'd be like, I'd like one chatas, please, and they'd be like, all right, $100. They would put the $100 in the pushka, and then they would give you a chatas. So you needed 6 different pushkas. Why? Because of Rebbe's shita. Rebbe's shita is that if you promise small, you have to deliver small. So if you just have one pushka, then it's possible. I'm not going to, meaning there was a pushka for small animals, there was a pushka for big animals, for lambs, for rams. So that way, if you go in and you pay for a ram, let's say you pay for a bull, we don't give you a smaller one, but vice versa. If I pay for like a bull amount of money, or let's say I pay for a small amount of money, they're not going to give me a bigger animal. You say, well, bigger animal's even better. No, not according to Rebbe. According to Rebbe, you need to get the animal you promised. If you promised a ram, you got to deliver a ram. You promised a lamb, no bull, whatever. So therefore, there were separate pushkas for separate animals. And the last opinion, and we'll finish up in 2 minutes, the last opinion is Bar Padah. He says, Keneged Haparim Ve'elim. They were designated for proceeds for the following cases. If you lost an animal, we've had this many, many times throughout Shas. Let's say I dedicate an animal as a karban, and then I lose it. I replace it, and then I find the original. What would they do with the original? It's now extra. You let it get a blemish, and then you sell it. You would put the proceeds in these pushkas. So these pushkas were dedicated for extra animals that got lost and were found. So one was, and for different animals. One was for a par, a bull. One was for an elam, a ram. One was for the kvasim. By the way, the bull was a chatas that was lost, a communal chatas. The rams were the me'ila ashams, or asham gazelas. The kvasim was the asham nazir, or a mitzayra that were lost. Seirim were the communal chatas goats that were lost. Hamoisaris, any extra funds for a purchase of a karban, meaning, let's say I donated a certain amount and then the price of animals dropped, so there's extra money. That's the fifth one. And the last one was the ma'ah. The ma'ah was, there's a machzah shekel that you would have to donate every year? You would actually have to also donate like a nickel on top of it, because what if your half a shekel was damaged and it was a little bit undervalued? You'd have to also throw in a nickel, a ma'ah, tiny amount. They would put the ma'ah in that pushka. Let's just finish up. Why is each opinion disagreed upon? There are 4 opinions. That means that each one is not universally accepted. Why not? So we'll run through. Kula k'chizkiya lo yamri. They all don't like Chizkiya's opinion, who said that the purpose of the pushkas is to avoid infighting with the Kahanim, because they say lansui lo chashinon. Why are we concerned there's infighting? Each person, it's a luck of the draw. It's whether the Beis Hamikdash is quiet. We're not concerned about infighting. Rav Yochanan Amri, they all said not like Rav Yochanan. Why? Lafusha lechashinan, who said that they were afraid that the coins will become rusty. We're not concerned about rust. Kiziri Amri, why they didn't say like Ziri, who said what? That it was following Rebbe's opinion, that it was in case you dedicate a small animal, you need a small animal. Because Yechidi Amri, they don't like to say that the entire pushkas were only following Rebbe as opposed to the Rabbanon. And Bar Padah Nami Amri, and we'll end with this. The reason why they don't like Bar Padah is because he said that each one was for if you lost an animal and found it, and then number 5 was for excess, and number 6 were for the nickels, the ma'ah, that were given with the machzah shekel. He says, Kulu Nami Moises. First of all, the 5th one was for the extra. They're all extra. Okay, they're all Moisaris. And also, Ma'anami L'shkala Mazli. To say that there was a special pushka box just for those nickels, those ma, that's not true. The ma was actually kept with the machzah shekel. Titania, as the Brisa says, Lahechon kalva zahoylech. What do they do with those extra coins? L'shkalim. They were added to the shkalim fund. Divrei Meir. Rav Elazar oimel in Nedava. The point is, according to Rav Meir, they were not put on the pushka. They were actually kept with the machzah shekel. All right, we'll stop here.